ever wondered why some people seem to have a gift for music? Have you ever wished that you could play by ear, sing in tune, improvise and jam? You're in the right place. Time to turn those wishes into reality. Welcome to the Musicality Podcast with your host, Christopher Sutton.
In our previous episode about improvisation, I introduced the way we approach learning improvisation at Musical U, trying to avoid the big pitfalls of the most common methods, which can leave you feeling totally uncreative or having to totally trust a mysterious instinct that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Our approach is based firmly on developing your musical ear so that you can bring your own musical ideas out into the world through your instrument. And one way we help you learn that is by providing exercises that give you particular constraints to follow and dimensions to explore. A great example of why that's helpful is the topic of rhythm in improvisation. Rhythm is often an underappreciated aspect of music. We all value the rhythm section of the band and recognize the importance of keeping the beat, but when it comes to creativity and rhythm, we often don't pay enough attention. I think that comes from the fact that for many musicians, the rhythm side of playing by ear comes fairly easily. After a year or two of learning music in the traditional instrument-based way, most people can clap back a rhythm or play the rhythm for a piece they've memorized without too much trouble. So we kind of take for granted that our rhythmic ear does what it needs to. But at Musical U, we actually have a whole roadmap and set of modules dedicated to rhythm ear training, and that's because training your ear beyond that basically good enough level can have a massive impact on your musicality. Something you'll often hear from musicians gigging in bands is that what makes the difference between a mediocre player and an excellent one isn't whether they're hitting the right notes. It's whether they're hitting them precisely and reliably in time or not. Meaning it's their sense of rhythm that marks them out as a pro-level player. It's a subtle one because, as a listener, we aren't typically assessing a musician's rhythm skills in a conscious way. If they play the wrong pitches, we'll notice, and if their rhythm is way off, we'll notice. But the difference between okay rhythm and excellent rhythm actually hits us in a subliminal way. Our ears detect it and appreciate it, even if we're not consciously aware of that's why we're particularly impressed or disappointed. And this isn't just about rhythmic accuracy. It also applies to rhythmic creativity, and that's where it's particularly relevant to improvisation. By training your ear to truly understand rhythmic patterns when you hear or play them, you empower yourself with a whole palette of creative options, quite separate from note pitches or how expressively you play. So in our Improvising Melody module at Musical U, we actually break it down in a big way. We take rhythm in isolation and spend some time just exploring what improvising rhythm looks like in the absence of any other improv decisions. This is something you can try yourself. One of the exercises is just to pick a note, one single note pitch, and challenge yourself to come up with an interesting phrase or solo. If you don't believe it can be done, then you need to go watch Ella Fitzgerald perform her one-note samba. The point of this exercise isn't that your next solo should be an Ella-inspired single-note masterpiece. It's that it opens your eyes and your ears to what's possible just with the rhythmic dimension of music. By applying constraints to the note pitches and other aspects of your improv, you force yourself to explore all kinds of possibilities purely in rhythm. And you can then take these back to improvising when those constraints are removed. To use the playground terminology I mentioned in the last episode, we're essentially setting up a rhythm-only playground that gives you a fun and creative way to develop your ear for the rhythm side of improvisation. You can add in specific ear training, like we have for understanding syncopation, note subdivisions, the connection to rhythm notation, different world music styles in rhythm, and so on. But it all becomes fuel for your creativity in that rhythm playground. This is also one case where the vocabulary approach to learning improvisation can be useful. Try listening to musicians you admire playing a solo, and focus your ear in on just the rhythmic aspect of their playing. This is an example of the active listening we talked about back on episode 35. Try to clap back their rhythms. Then try using just their rhythms, not the note pitches, for your own improvised lines. If you do this same exercise with less impressive musicians, you will quickly notice the impact that rhythmic creativity and accuracy has on the musical effectiveness of an improvisation. It's no coincidence that the traditional approaches to music education that best nurture inner musicality all address rhythm in a big way. Kodai is known for a way of speaking rhythms, something we teach at Musical U too, which helps you really understand rhythmic patterns and subdivisions in a deep way. And as we heard in episode 46 recently with Jeremy Dittus of the Dalcroze School of the Rockies, the Dalcroze approach has a whole branch called Eurythmics, which uses body movement to internalize a great sense of rhythm and an instinctive connection to rhythmic creativity. Rhythm was something I was keen to talk about early in this series of podcast episodes for Musical U's Improv Month, and it's something we cover early on in our improv roadmap too, because it is typically massively underutilized for learning to be a creative and impressive improviser. We all get so caught up in what notes to play that we forget it's arguably even more important to think about when to play them. Spending some time on rhythm ear training and experimenting in rhythm improv playgrounds can have a dramatic positive impact on your improvisational freedom and creativity. If you've been looking for an easy way to start trying to improvise without getting overwhelmed by scales and chords, or you've been improvising based on rules and patterns but felt your solos were growing repetitive and samey, then I would really encourage you to spend some time exploring in depth this undervalued but massively important dimension of musical improvisation, rhythm.
Thank you for listening to the Musicality Podcast. This episode has ended, but your musical journey continues. Head over to musicalitypodcast.com, where you will find the links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive for podcast listeners. That's musicalitypodcast.com.